Dear learners, welcome to this presentation on Herbarium, an essential tool for plant conservation, education and research. I am Dr. Gausia Bashri from the Department of Botany, Aligarh Muslim University. I will be guiding you through the Herbaria and its fascinating role in documenting plant diversity, supporting scientific studies and contributing to biodiversity conservation. So let's start the today's session that is in which we will learn about the herbaria. So today we will cover the foundational aspects of herbaria, starting with their definition and aims. Then we will delve into the history, types and function of herbaria. Then we will explore their roles in biodiversity conservation and review some notable herbaria around the world and in India. So this is our overview that we will learn today in this particular session. So starting from the herbaria, what is an herbarium? As building on the previous discussion, we will delve into the fascinating world of herbaria. So let's start. What is herbarium? A herbarium is essentially a collection of preserved plant specimens that are used for scientific study. As you can see in this particular image, this is a preserved specimen of the plant which is used for the scientific study. So, the primary aim of a herbaria is to document biodiversity and facilitate research on plant taxonomy, ecology and conservation. Herbaria have a rich history dating back to the Renaissance when botanists began to collecting and cataloging plants systematically. And understanding the evolution of herbaria provide context to their current relevance. So, we can say that an herbaria is essentially a library of plant specimen, and the herbaria is a storehouse that is a collection of dried and pressed plant specimen collected from different places and arranged according to some known system of classification to facilitate identification, nomenclature and preservation of the records. As you can see here, these herbarium records are arranged according to the particular system of classification. As in India, you will find most of the herbaria records are arranged according to the Bentham and Hooker system of classification, and most of the Commonwealth countries have this type of a record. And different types of herbaria record they have arranged. Generally they become, and different types of herbaria records generally they have either England and Prantl system, they followed them, or they may have followed some recent type of classification like the Thorne system of classification. So depending upon here the popularity of the classification, they have a different types of arrangement of the plants. And if we see the term herbarium, which was originally used for the books on medicinal plants, but Tonfort around 1700 century applied it to the collection of dried plants. This shift was pivotal in how we document plant diversity, as the term herba is originally meant for grass or pasture that was derived from the Greek, which means fob, which in turn appeared to have been derived from the Sanskrit word that is the bhar. So that is mean also the pasture or forest as referenced by the Lewis, City and Short in Latin dictionary. So basically, as we have seen, the herbaria is a dried collection of plant, as you can see in this particular image, in which all the parts of the plant is very preserved very systematically. So we can easily identify or study when they are in the need. So if we think of herbaria, it is look like a library that catalog the biological diversity of plant across time and space. Each specimen can reveal variations influenced by different habitats and ecological factors, enabling us to study biodiversity patterns, evolutionary trends and even climate change impacts. So this is the herbaria that have the record of the biological information. And individual plant specific preparation. In the case of herbarium, when creating a herbarium specimen, the plant is carefully dried and pressed to preserve essential identification features. Like if this particular plant has the inflorescence which is have typical type and their fruit which have a specific type of fruits. So we have to preserve each and every part of the plant that help in the identification of that particular plants. So it is important to preserve all the plant part which is important in that identification of that particular plants, and they are pasted after the drying into the herbarium sheet which is called as, in singular which is herbarium and in plural it is called as herbaria. So these dried samples or herbaria sheets contain whole plants or specific plant parts, providing a lasting record for future study. So depending upon the type of plant, because if the plant is very small, that is herbaceous in nature, then we can collect whole plant, then dry it, press it and paste whole plant on the herbarium sheet. In the case of larger trees or shrubs, we have a small size twig plant that have all the important feature that is important for the identification of that particular plant. As we can see here in this particular case, there is a twig of the plant is taken which is pasted on the herbarium sheet, and all the floral characteristics here pasted, you can see here, that is important for the identification of that particular plant. And we can also choose a whole plant in case of a small plant, that is also provide the identification point for the plants. Then the next is the storage condition for the herbarium specimen. After the preparing the herbarium, it is important to store them properly, because if there will be no proper storage, then this herbarium which we have prepared from very tedious process we are collecting, and then this is the one of the most important process. For the proper storage conditions are crucial, like herbarium specimens are kept in a specialized cabinet to protect them from sunlight, pests and humidity. And the ideal storage temperature ranges from 18 degree to 20 degree centigrade with humidity levels between 45 and 55%, that ensuring the specimen remain intact for long term use. So this is a very important for the storage of herbarium specimens. Now moving toward the preserving non-dryable plants, because many plants have some plant parts which is we cannot dry them properly, like succulents. These have a challenging to press and dry. Instead, these are preserved in liquid solution such as formaldehyde, that is ranges from 2 to 5% formaldehyde solution, or maybe FFA solution, that is formalin, acetone, alcohol in the ratio of 5:5:90. So those flower plant which we cannot dry and press them, these floral part or plant will preserved in the solution, in the formalin solution, or in case of formaldehyde, depending upon the plant materials. So this technique is also quite useful, because many plant like fruit, if we press the fruit, the nature of the fruit is disturbed. So this type of fruit is preserved in the formaldehyde solution or maybe formalin solution. Now moving towards the next plant part, that is the preservation of gymnosperms and small plant parts. As we have discussed earlier, with the plant that may be preserved in the form of a whole plant, or maybe in case of a small twig, it is preserved and its parts is preserved in the different types. Now moving toward the preservation of gymnosperm and small plant parts. Large and woody plant parts such as gymnosperms, cones and palms fronds are stored dry in labeled glass boxes, as you can see here in this particular image. In this, there is these boxes have a different cones of gymnosperms, they have a palm fronds, because we cannot press them in a sheet, or we cannot store them in a formaldehyde solution. So these type of cones which have a very hard and dry part, and they have a specific structure, this type of is stored in a glass boxes. and small specimens like seeds or mosses are packed in envelope. As you can see here, these are the envelopes which containing a specific like lichens, mosses, roots, barks. These type of a plant material is stored in this kind of a envelope. So this approach ensures all plant forms can be documented regardless of their size or structure, as we can press them and paste them in the herbarium sheet, or we can collect them and store in a formaldehyde solution, or we can collect and store in a glass box, or in case of envelope. So herbarium is of quite different type depending upon the different plant parts. So in herbarium is herbarium is a filling system for the botanical data. Like herbarium is a vast filling system containing both physical plant specimens and essential information on each plant's ecological and biological characteristics. And the label provide data on plant names, collection location, flowering times and more, adding depth to our understanding of plant diversity. So we can say that herbarium is a vast reservoir of plants. So this is the introduction or definition of the herbarium, that is the reservoir of the plant in different forms. Now moving towards the next part of the topic, that is the aims of herbarium preparation. And the primary aim of herbaria are to document plant diversity that contribute to scientific research, preserve endangered species and educate the public. Herbaria serve as a repositories for plant data that inform conservation, provide resources for researchers and help to raise awareness of environmental issues. And these are the some main aims of the herbarium study, like to study various plant parts, to contribute to scientific studies, to preserve the catalogs of seeds and dried herbarium plants, to maintain plants on the edge of extinction, to inform the students and public about these plants, and to inform them of the effect of global warming on the ecological system. Now moving towards the next part, that is the history of the herbarium preparation. As the art of herbarium was initiated by an Italian taxonomist from Bologna, Italy, named as Luca Ghini. He was a professor of medicine and botany at the University of Pisa during the 16th century, and it also credited for developing the Pisa Botanical Garden in Italy in 1544. He had a collection of about 300 specimens in 1551. Unfortunately, not much is currently known about his herbarium and it may be lost. As you can see, this is the image of Luca Ghini, who is the inventor of herbarium, and this one is their type of record that he have prepared. Then his student Gerald Skibo continued this art, and his herbarium is still preserved in Rome. In the middle years of 16th century, 3 Guinness students, namely Aldrovandi and Cisalpino from Italy and Turner from England, also made their own herbarium and disseminated this art throughout the Europe. And Intibi was found to be the first herbarium which moved many countries over centuries, and at present it preserved in the Netherlands. As you can see, this is the historical timeline of the 16th century Italian herbaria that is invented by Luca Ghini, and their students developed Intibi, which is moved in different Europe countries. From then the final dating of this Intibi is done in the 1558, and these are the students who worked a lot in the preparation of this herbarium. So from there it started by the Luca Ghini, and their students cultivated this culture and prepared herbarium which are still preserved in Europe countries and Netherlands. So in the 16th century, these herbarium are called as Hortus siccus, that is dry garden, or Hortus himalis for winter garden. However, the word herbarium, that is the plural is herbaria, was first applied by Pitande Tonfort in the book Elements de la Botanique. In those days, the herbarium sheets were bound into volumes, and just like books, these herbaria volumes were also arranged vertically as in libraries. So, it is act like a book, as we have seen in the pictures with the Luca Guinea. These are the type of herbaria which is prepared in form of books and in volumes. After the invention, after this, it was the famous Swedish naturalist, that is the Carolus Linnaeus, who advised readers, or if his philosophy of Botanica in 1751, to mount just one specimen per sheet and refrain from one binding the sheets together. So, the modern type of herbaria that we are seeing today is the idea of the Carolus Linnaeus. Then if we see the different kinds of herbarium, that depends upon the content, purpose, region, place and plants group that present, and these are the different types of herbarium depending upon these conditions. The first one is that is the herbaria of medicinal plants. The herbaria include a specimen of plants of known medicinal value or supposed to have a medicinal properties. And that next type of herbaria, that is the herbaria of weeds. This type of herbaria have a weeds of cultivated fields and waste places. And the third kind in this particular category is the regional herbaria. The herbaria of a particular region or place, like herbaria of a arid zone circle like Jodhpur, herbarium of a central circle, Allahabad, herbarium of a particular university or institution. So these are different kinds of herbaria depending upon their purpose, content and plant groups. Now moving towards the objectives of herbarium preparation. Like over 72 uses have been mentioned by the Wikifunk for a herbarium. Here some there is listed, like it helps in the identification of a plant specimen, important for data recorded on herbarium labels, aid in planning field trips. The collection are also used for climate change studies and producing checklist for flora, herbaria, that is a dried pressed plant specimen and their associated field data, ancillary collection, that is photograph and laboratory materials are remarkable sources of information about plants and the geographical regions they inhabit. They provide the comparative material that is essential for studies in taxonomy, systematics, ecology, anatomy, morphology, conservation biology, biodiversity, ethnobotany and paleobotany, as well as used for academic and public purposes. So, a herbarium is a comprehensive data bank which represents the world's plant diversity in one place, and students or researchers who are facing difficulties in collecting plants from other parts of the world can study the collection of plants in a single herbarium. So, this is a quite effective, because if we have a herbarium in our city, we can study different types of plant that are not present in our city. So, that help in the education as well as in the researcher, and it also documented the biodiversity of that particular region as well as the biodiversity of the world. So, if we see the role of herbaria, herbaria have a numerous roles, from aiding plant identification to supporting botanical research. They serve as a repositories for data that facilitate taxonomic studies and help researchers to understand plant evolution and distribution. The information stored in herbaria is also used in conservation, education and public awareness. So these are the some roles. Like the first one is the documentation and preservation of plant diversity. Like herbaria serve as a repository for plant specimen, providing a permanent record of plant diversity across different regions and time period. This helps track change in biodiversity and species distribution. Then the next role is identification and classification. Like herbarium specimen assist in the accurate identification and classification of plants, which is fundamental for cataloging biodiversity and understanding the species relationship, evolution and distribution. Then in they also have a role in research and education because herbaria provide a valuable resources for scientific research, offering access to specimen data that supports studies in taxonomy, ecology, climate change and conservation biology. They also serve as educational tools for students and public, raising awareness about the plant diversity and importance of conservation. Then the next important role of herbaria in monitoring environmental and climate changes, like a specimen in herbaria can reveal historical pattern in the plant distribution and flowering times that enables researcher to study the impacts of environmental changes and climate on the plant population over the time. Then they also support conservation efforts because herbarium data helps to identify the rare, endangered and invasive species and guiding conservation priorities and strategies. By understanding species habitats, distribution and its ecological needs, herbaria support efforts to protect critical habitats and promote biodiversity. Then they also facilitate restoration and reintroduction as herbarium collection provides essential information on native species and their natural habitat, aiding in the habitat restoration and reintroduction program, which are crucial for recovering degraded ecosystem and threatened species. Then the last role in biodiversity of the herbarium is providing reference material for DNA studies, like modern herbaria also preserve DNA from a specimen, enabling genetic studies that enhance our understanding of plant diversity, gene flow and evolutionary processes which are valuable for conservational genetics. So these are the some roles that help in the promote biodiversity. Now next moving towards the functions of the herbaria, which have numerous functions from aiding plant identification to supporting botanical research, and they serve as a repository for data, facilitate taxonomic studies and help researchers understanding plant evolution and distribution. Thus, the information is stored in herbaria is also used in conservation as we have discussed earlier in education and public awareness. So, besides their role in the herbaria in the biological, they have many functions. These are the functions that is the of the herbarium. So first, herbaria serve as an invaluable conservatory for dried plant material collected from different parts of the world. Thus, in one place, they provide the basic material for study of the flora and vegetation of the different places of region. So this is the one of the most advantage of the having a herbaria in a particular region. Since the next is the herbaria is a permanent record of the flora of different region. It can serve as a physical evidence of the vegetation of that particular region which may be destroyed due to some natural catastrophes. So it is have a evidence of that particular vegetation of that particular regions. Then the next function of the herbarium is these specimens in the herbarium carry valuable data on their labels such as habitat, habit, local names, color of flowers or other character of the plant, native uses of the plant, abundance or frequency of the species associated with the plant, etc. These data provides valuable materials for proper morphological description, range of variation, distribution and utilization of a similar plant collected from a different region. Thus, herbarium provides data for botanical, ethnobotanical and phytogeographical studies also. The next, it serves as a source for the collection of biodiversity as we have discussed earlier, and the most of the estimates of the global biodiversity today are based on the herbarium collection only. So it is a very important for the conservation of the biodiversity because we have the idea of the particularly biodiversity because of the presence of the herbarium collection. Then it is serve as an aid in a teaching body to student as it helps as a teacher to show plant specimen that may not be fresh during the course, because as we know many plants have a different seasons of the flowers. So if we have a preserved dried material of that particular specimen, we can show them. So it help in the teaching. Now Next is the herbarium are also utilized as a reference centers for the identification of the plant by botanists doing research work in taxonomy, pharmacology, ecology and agriculture. So these are the reference centers because suppose we are doing a research on a particular topic. So if we using that particular plant that we have to studying in the particular research, we have to code them that these are the plant, this particular number is present in that herbaria, which is a very important and for the identification of that particular plant. Then the next one is the voucher specimen that preserved in the various herbaria provide an index of specimens on which studies on the chromosome, phytochemistry and palynology etc. have been undertaken. Then the preserved specimens of a herbaria have a collection of taxa from a far and wide range involving all world species, serving the requirement of biosystematic research. Then the next function of herbaria provide important data on actual places of occurrence, time of flowering and fruiting associated with the species and other data for the research in embryology, cytology and ecology. So this is a very crucial for the knowing us what is the time of flowering of particular plant or what is the actual places of occurring. Suppose we are visiting a place and in the herbarium we have seen particular plant. If we want to collect some plant and we will like to study the further this particular plant, so because of the herbarium it has a information that from where this particular plant is collected. So you can easily we move to that particular place and collect that particular plant and we will study that particular plant in the live. The herbaria have proved to be a very, the next one that is the herbaria have to prove to be a very valuable source of information for ethnobotanical research as many native uses of plants are recorded on the herbarium sheets. Ethnobotanically is also a very important aspect because from the herbaria has a information that how these plants are useful in the local regions. Then the next one is a list of endangered specimens of any region can be prepared only by verifying the herbarium specimens because they have a record of that particular in these regions. Then the next one is the monographs for the genera of families are prepared by studying the herbarium specimens. And the next, the classification of the world flora is based on the herbarium material and associated literature. Like system of the Bentham system of classification is based on the world flora. Because of that, there is in the large herbaria that is present in the Kew Botanical Garden. So they have access to different types of plant that present all over the world. So the collection of the world flora is based on the herbarium material and associated literature because it is not possible a single person to go all over the world and then classify the plants. So herbarium, it is a very important for any botanist or researcher to classify the plant because it is providing a same place for all the plants in a particular region. Then the next one is the herbaria preserve the national plant wealth and provide a scientific information on the public regarding the plants. And the last one is the big herbaria provide training facilities to young students in herbaria practices. These are some functions of herbaria. That's all for the today's session. Next, we will learn about some other aspects of the herbaria like the types of herbaria, the major herbariums of the world and India in the next session.